Yeah, Karen.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to talk on this bill. It's been a long tradition in this country during the summer months for many of us to head into the fruit growing areas of New Zealand and get a summer job picking fruit. Many of us no doubt have done that during our earlier lives, and fruit picking in reality means picking the good ones and leaving the not so good ones behind. It also involves picking the fruit that you can reach, and if you've brought your ladder with you, then you can get to the top of the tree and get the fruit. But if you haven't brought your ladder, or if you can't be bothered climbing up it, then it's the low-hanging fruit, essentially, that you end up picking. Cherry picking.
Yes, there's that too. Cherry
picking, Mr. Speaker. It's an expression which is apt for this bill, really. Apt for this bill. And indeed, I'd say for the attitude of this government generally, as to privacy issues, and what they describe as openness and transparency. It's a few tidbits. I mean, you know, there's plenty of other analogies that you could use around crumbs and tidbits and that sort of thing, but I've gone with the fruit picking and the cherry picking analogy today because ultimately it's also been described by my colleague Leanne Dalzell as the piecemeal approach. Do a little bit and claim that you've done a lot.
That's right. Look like you're doing something.
Which really sums up this government, actually. And around information sharing, around privacy protection, and certainly around openness and transparency. And it's time, Mr. Speaker, it's time to put this government on notice around those issues, that it will be challenged and held accountable on secrecy, withholding information, doing backroom deals, and insincerity, which is probably one of the worst things that this government is guilty of. This bill, and as Leanne Dalzell pointed out, it does take a piecemeal approach to dealing with information sharing. It doesn't stand the claims and may not stand the claims that have been made to the need for it. In fact, and I know that she talked quite at length about the doing something to enhance the protection of vulnerable children. We agree with the New Zealand Law Society on this issue and a number of other submitters that there are better approaches than simply enacting some of those cherry-picked approaches to the Law Commission's review of privacy law. We say that a comprehensive review of the Act is on the basis of all of the Law Commission's work is essential, and unfortunately that's not what we're seeing here today. We question this government's veracity and we challenge them on the hypocrisy and of their rhetoric and of their actions on all of these issues. Mr. Speaker, openness and transparency has the power, it truly has the power to transform government. And if we had that before us today, then it would be something to be celebrating. But unfortunately, that's not the case. It can strengthen people's trust in government and encourage greater public participation in decision-making. Participative democracy is one of the things that we across the House, no matter what party we are part of, we should all be aspiring to. But unfortunately what we see on the other side is window dressing and cherry picking and picking the things out or the low-hanging fruit that are going to give some returns and give the appearance of doing something. But actually openness and transparency is the very last thing that it's actually meant to be delivering. Labor, on the other hand, and the Greens, by their very nature, demonstrate commitment to greater openness and transparency. I didn't see a policy coming from that side of the House on open government at the last election, and I doubt that we'll see one this time. And that's about providing citizens with mechanisms that they can feel confident that there are ways that they can truly participate in policy development and government decision making. And that is what is really important, and that is what this bill should really be standing for. But unfortunately, again, as you know, it is ultimately about cherry picking. It's about picking the eyes out of a law commission, a substantive law commission report, and providing something to the House which really doesn't address any really big issues at all. And I, alongside this bill, Mr. Speaker, goes the recent discussion around the Law Commission's report on the Official Information Act. And I'd just like to refer to some of the statements that were made by the Minister around this that I really believe can be seriously challenged. She said, and it was just very recently, that New Zealand has an open parliament by international standards, and Parliament currently makes a great deal of information available. She also said that the government is committed to openness and transparency, streamlining processes and reducing red tape for agencies, businesses and individuals. Well, let me refer you to a report that was tabled in this House only just today by the Select Committee, the Commerce Select Committee, which was the financial review of the Ministry of Economic Development, etc., otherwise known as MOBI, in which there was a Labour Party minority view, which said, Labour members consider that in respect of the Ministry's response to written questions, its performance in the hearings and in Official Information Act requests on related issues, there has been an unfortunate pattern of denial of legitimate information to members of Parliament and the Commerce Committee by this Ministry. In addition, Labour members of the committee have been denied timely and accurate information in response to written parliamentary questions and Official Information Act requests by the Ministry and Minister on the issues covered by the committee's questions. On this occasion, the Commerce Committee felt the need to recall the Ministry for a special hearing, which is most unheard of, Mr. Speaker, to require full and frank responses to written Select Committee questions. While further information has been provided prior and subsequent to the second hearing, Labour members remain very concerned by the difficulty of requiring information that should have been readily provided to the committee in the first instance. Labour members do not wish to see a repeat of this process in next year's hearing. And let me say, Mr. Speaker, if there wasn't an issue, they wouldn't have been recalled.
Point of order, Katrina Shanks.
Speaker, I'd like the Labour member to add the national view after what was the Labour view.
No, that's not a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Karen.
So the relevance of this to the Privacy and Information Sharing Bill is ultimately goes back to the point around cherry picking the points that they think are going to get a bit of attention, make everybody think they're doing something, but ultimately behind the scenes they're not. And this was, if this wasn't a significant issue, then that Chief Executive and his ministry would not have been recalled for a second hearing in that Select Committee. Mr. Speaker, contrary to this, and conversely, democracy and public confidence relies utterly on citizens knowing what government is doing and why, and being able to take part in decision making and being able to get access to information. And one of the most important things they could be doing right now, and how citizens could be feeling confident, is proactively releasing information. And what Labour policy is to establish as a default practice ministers and government agencies releasing all cabinet papers and other relevant papers onto a dedicated website in line with the Official Information Act once a decision is announced by the government. Mr. Speaker, if this government wants the trust of its citizens, that would be a good start.
I call Jan Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak to the privacy information